All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started on the February edition of the Northwest Gas Association's monthly webinar series. Welcome. My name is Dan Kirshner. I'm the Executive Director of the Northwest Gas Association. And we're really pleased today to welcome Michelle Detweiler, the Executive Director of the Renewable Hydrogen Alliance. Easy for you to say, right, Michelle? Michelle's been with the Renewable Hydrogen Alliance for not since its inception, but closely there. And she's worked in a bunch of different areas of the energy sector for more than 20 years. She got her MPA at George Washington University and started her career at the World Bank in DC. She's worked on infrastructure projects sited in China, North Africa, and Iran, and that's where she first realized she had an abiding interest in the energy sector. She moved to Portland and worked with the Outerwind law firm in their energy practice as a paraprofessional, representing municipal and corporate cooperative utilities all across Alaska. Interesting, Michelle. In 2007, she joined JELD-WEN, the famous formerly Oregon-based maker of doors and windows that we love so much. Became the Director of Government Affairs there, working on federal energy efficiency policy in the building products sector. Michelle rounded out her energy sector experience most recently as a government affairs specialist, managing the Washington, California state legislative portfolios at PacifiCorp. And I think most of you know who PacifiCorp is. So she has quite a history, and we're really grateful, Michelle, that you could join us today and share an update on what's going on with hydrogen development in the Pacific Northwest in particular. But before we get there, I just want to remind our participants to remain muted as we go through this. If you have questions, please use the chat function. I think you all are familiar enough by now, given COVID and our experience with Zoom and Teams and the like. You all know how to use that chat function. So I'll be monitoring that throughout Michelle's presentation. If you have a question, please use the chat function to type out your question. When I see a question, I will wait for Michelle to take a breath, and then I will interrupt her and ask your question for you. So again, please keep your microphones muted, ask your questions in the chat. Be aware we're recording this webinar. We post it afterwards to the Northwest Gas Association's YouTube channel. You see the link there. And for those of you on the presentation, or for folks who missed it and are interested in Michelle's deck, please contact Judy Adair at the Northwest Gas Association. I think most of you received an email from her earlier today, so you should have her email address, and ask her for a copy of Michelle's deck. Michelle has graciously made that available to you when she's all done. So our next webinar, just one pitch for that, in March, is the Net Zero Infrastructure Project being developed by GTI Energy. We're very excited about that and hope you'll join us for that. Those of you on our webinar know how to sign up, so please sign up for that. And Michelle, I'm going to quit sharing and let you take it from here, once again with my thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, and great to be here. Hello, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. And I'm going to share my screen here and put my deck in presentation mode. Let's see, is that coming through yet?
Or it's not in presentation mode yet, but
okay, let me try that again.
It feels like something's happening.
Yeah. My machine is a little, there we go.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay, and I'm gonna move that away here. All right, so again, great to be here. I'm just going to give you sort of an overview of exactly what the title of this presentation is, which is just an update on what's happening in hydrogen in the Pacific Northwest. For some of you who are not familiar with the Renewable Hydrogen Alliance, we have been around since 2018, have over 80 members that represent utilities, clean energy and clean fuel advocacy groups, hydrogen production equipment manufacturers, trade unions, et cetera. We have quite the diverse membership. We've managed to sponsor or help get about 13 pieces of hydrogen legislation passed in both Washington and Oregon. These range from tax incentives to making sure that we're laying the groundwork for deploying fuel cell vehicles in the region. And lots of other fun stuff, giving public transit agencies the authority to produce, sell, and distribute hydrogen and things like that. Even some definitions, which I can get into here in a little bit. We get invited to participate in lots of rules advisory committees and technical advisory committees. Those can have ranged from the Oregon DEQ GHG reporting RAC, the Future of Gas Work Group, the Washington State Hydrogen Strategy Advisory Group. Were recently invited and participated in Governor Inslee's clean energy trade mission to Australia back in November. And we've participated in White House roundtables and lots of stuff like that. So it's been very exciting, and it's very encouraging that we get included in those very, very important discussions. We are a board member of the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Association, which is the oversight organization for the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub. Again, we like to be relied upon for accurate information about the hydrogen industry in the region. So I'm sure lots of you are on this call because you're interested in this information. The whole process for the Hydrogen Hub and the final award to our region, Pacific Northwest, took about a year. And in that process, there were, as you can see here, lots of different stages. And the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub is the only hub in the country out of all 7 that is considered sort of, the 100% green hub. Although I will say we tend to shy away or really avoid using colors when we talk about different ways to produce hydrogen. The California Arches Hub does have renewable and green electrolytic hydrogen in it, but it also has some carbon capture, some natural gas with carbon capture. These are how the hub nodes are organized, and within those nodes are projects. So 8 nodes, 20 projects. The nodes include all kinds of transportation, fueling, fertilizer, energy storage, other things like that. The node 7, I always like to point this out because the map is a little strange here. Node 7, it looks like it's sitting on top of Portland. It's actually not. It's more up in the Chehalis region, and that is a node that includes a public transit facility that will produce hydrogen. It will also fuel public transit buses. It's affiliated. It's sort of in the port of Chehalis on I-5, and the hope is that can help to support and supply hydrogen to, for instance, TriMet and other public transit agencies, down in Oregon and other places in Southwest Washington. Node 1 is, I can give you sort of a explanation of kind of what projects are in each of these nodes. Node 1 is the Fortescue Future Industries TransAlta site. That's going to be hydrogen production and energy storage. Number 2 is the Alta Gas Cherry Point site. 3 is a project many of you probably already know about. It's the first, I call it the first mover project. It is the Douglas County Public Utility District hydrogen production project that will utilize excess hydropower from their Wells Dam. 4 is the Atlas Agro Fertilizer production facility. 5, Baker City, actually Durkee, is the Novo Hydrogen project. 6 is the Mitsubishi Williams Pipeline, PGE, heavy duty transportation and storage project. And I'm super high level here, not trying to get into too much detail about what exactly these projects are. And then 7, again, is the Lewis County Public Transit Agency project. And 8 in Montana is the St. Regis Solar mobile hydrogen fueling and hydrogen produced from solar energy. These projects, sort of what you see here and what I have listed, is not absolutely set in stone. The request in the application for the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub grant funding from DOE was $1.25 billion. That was the max amount you could ask for. So that's pretty much what everybody asked for. We have, the award notice says the Pacific Northwest Hub is eligible to get upwards of $1 billion. So what that means is that the scope of these projects will likely change. And so we don't know the exact details, the exact size, the exact elements of these projects until such time as negotiations are completed, which is expected to be about mid-April. So, more to come, more details will be released on these projects after those negotiations are complete. This is what we're talking about as far as the benefits of this hub. This is what we're trying to accomplish here. So with that $1 billion in funding, there was an obligation set out by DOE that the private entities doing the projects had to do a match. So, there's a $7 billion commitment on the part of these private companies to make this successful, and that's a huge commitment and a lot of money on the table. So I try to emphasize this point when I talk, for instance, when I talk to members of the legislature. This is not just a big government money dump. This is the majority of the risk, and the financing is being borne by the entities doing the projects. As you can probably see from the map, 2/3 of the activity is in Washington. We hope to create and support 10,000 jobs with potential to sustain up to 70,000 regional jobs. And of course, there are obligations for using union employment or union jobs, union skills. And then, of course, the GHG emissions reductions that we hope to achieve by displacing fossil fuel in a lot of different sectors. And the community benefits piece is really, really important. There's a lot of emphasis on this. And I think that planning is very much in shape, being developed right now. And I'm not exactly sure when the community engagement meetings will start, but I imagine it's going to be, obviously sometime after the negotiations are complete, because I think what it's important to avoid is kind of going into a community that may or may not get a project. So we want to make sure that, I think the hub wants to make sure that only until we absolutely know where the projects are going to be and which projects are going to be still in the hub, does it make sense to start that community engagement piece.
Michelle, maybe I'll just interrupt for just a moment and remind our viewers that if you have questions for Michelle as she's going through this information, please use the chat function, and we encourage you to do so. So I know Michelle would love to have questions and engage a little bit interactively if you're all willing to do so. So please do feel free to use that chat function to pose your questions. Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you. Softball questions only. So really what we're looking at here is about 12 to 13 years total for the hubs to be fully operational. Although, some projects are far enough along that they could be operational in just a few years. What the hope is that the Douglas County PUD project comes online before the end of 2024. And the 4 phases in this slide can roughly be or briefly summarized as planning, development, construction, and operation. It's also important to note that the diamonds in that graphic indicate go, no go decision points. So between each phase, each project has to meet some standard developed by DOE before they can move on to the next stage. And that's meeting technical, financial, community benefit commitments to determine whether an award can progress, a project, an award recipient can progress to the next phase. I'm having trouble getting my slides moving. This is a project example. So this is Novo Hydrogen. You can see what their timeline is, right? So it may be, it's quicker than what is provided through the whole hub award period. And it's important to note that while some projects are on different completion timelines, they still have to meet every one of the, all the thresholds set out by DOE. And Novo Hydrogen will be producing, as I mentioned earlier, they'll be building a facility to produce hydrogen in the Baker City area. And that hydrogen will likely, the end users are heavy duty transportation, mining vehicles, and industrial uses. Again, all the projects in the hub are subject to the same siting and permitting and regulatory requirements as any other project would be. You don't get to skip go and collect $200 just because you're in the hub. And the other piece that's important to note about the benefits of this hub and the purpose of it is it really is meant to not just establish a network infrastructure of hydrogen production, but also to stimulate that demand, make it easier. So if you always everybody talks about the chicken and egg problem in the hydrogen industry, right? So nobody's going to produce hydrogen if there's nobody willing to use it, and vice versa. The hub kind of gets after what I call the chicken part, which is the supply part, and then hopefully the eggs will come after. So the eggs being transit agencies, ports, natural gas distribution companies, electric utilities, etc. And while the hub is the thing that is taking up all the oxygen in the room right now, with regard to hydrogen, there's lots of other stuff happening. So there's at least, there's somewhere on the order of 40 publicly announced projects happening in the region. Some of these overlap with the hub. There's, of course, the hydrogen production tax credit. It's what all of us in the industry are head down on right now. Some of the examples, going back to the projects outside the hub, some of the examples of these are, You've got the Port of Portland, which is doing a feasibility study on both electric buses and hydrogen fuel cell buses to replace their diesel buses in their 24/7 satellite parking lot operations. You've got hydrogen and sustainable aviation. This is actually new to me. I only learned this a few months ago. Hydrogen and sustainable aviation fuel projects in Pendleton. And then, of course, there's that activity's been going on quite a while in Moses Lake, Washington as well. Renewable diesel production, which needs hydrogen at Lakeview, Oregon, and Port Westward, Oregon. Back to the hydrogen production credit, just a heads up or a kind of an overview of where RHA is landing on this piece. And we are, from what I can tell, when we talk to either our members or hub participants, other parties, we're all pretty much in alignment that the 3 pillars just doesn't make sense, particularly not in the Northwest, where we already have mandatory, statutory, required clean energy targets, RPS, clean fuels requirements, the advanced clean cars rule, et cetera. And the 3 pillars only accounts for one side of the carbon ledger. It only talks about induced emissions. They don't talk about at all, and Treasury has not incorporated, as they have put forward that the 3 pillars is the thing that they are thinking about requiring to get the tax credit. They don't talk about the other side of the ledger, which I find ironic for an agency full of accountants. That there are also avoided emissions. So you have potentially induced emissions, but you also have avoided emissions. So when you start adopting and utilizing clean hydrogen to decarbonize a diesel fleet or decarbonize a natural gas generation plant, there's avoided emissions there. And there's absolutely no accounting for that in the draft rules right now at all. So we're going to be making that point. They do the draft rules, if you haven't looked at them, do offer up some alternatives. Treasury wants comments on, hey, if this doesn't work, what else should we do? Should we figure out a different way to treat renewable resources that are older than 36 months? And some alternatives include exempting hydrogen producers. This is what we are really pushing, and I think a lot of our industry partners are pushing this too, is exempting or considering projects have met the requirement of additionality, or as the draft rules call it, incrementality, if they are in a state that has a mandatory climate policy or 100% clean energy or other provisions. We want those projects, those hydrogen producers, to be deemed having met the requirement. And I don't know, I could get so far down in the rabbit hole about this issue. But for those of you who sort of don't know what the 3 pillars are, I can quickly go through them. So these are, yeah.
Michelle, before you do, I do have a question that I think preceded this rabbit trail a little bit. So let's maybe step back just a little. And one question from Clinton Keller is, is there a tax credit for manufacturing or selling composite overwrap pressure vessels, ground and transportation, for hydrogen that can be passed along to a client? So tax credits for equipment to transport hydrogen. I think that's
yeah, there may be, but that's not the new one, which is 45V, which is this hydrogen production tax credit. The hydrogen production tax credit is a tax credit that has never been in the code before the Inflation Reduction Act was passed. So there may be a tax credit available for such equipment, but I don't know the answer to that. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
So trying to remember where I was on the three pillars.
Three pillars, yeah.
So the three pillars are, and these are requirements that predominantly the environmental advocates pushed for with Treasury, because they were worried that hydrogen production, with its particularly electrolytic hydrogen production, with its high energy requirements, would cannibalize existing renewable energy, in a particular state or region. And they were worried that it would cause more fossil fuel generation to have to be put on the grid. And so the rule is, you can only use, you have to essentially build a dedicated renewable energy resource to make your hydrogen. So, which technically eliminates the 30,000 megawatts of hydropower we have in the Northwest from being able to be used to make hydrogen. And then the second pillar is what they call temporal matching. This is that for every hour you're producing hydrogen, you have to match that to an hour of renewable energy that was on the grid. And then the third one is geographic deliverability. So you can't use a wreck from Texas to clean up the electricity you're using to produce hydrogen in Oregon, that kind of thing. So, and they have some ideas on deliverability. That's not the most controversial one. The most controversial one is the temporal matching and the additionality. And just a quick word on, for this audience, on how the 45V is treating hydrogen produced with, for instance, natural gas or RNG. The rules sort of punt a little bit on this. They don't go into much detail. Treasury asks for a lot of feedback on that. But the interesting piece is that combination of 45V and then 45Q being the tax credit for carbon capture and storage. And again, not to get too far down the weeds, but I'll do it for a little bit for purposes of anybody in the gas distribution industry here who's interested. My understanding, and this understanding has been confirmed as being pretty accurate by some very, very experienced tax counsel. I am not tax counsel, so take this with a grain of salt to some degree. The 45V tax credit talks about hydrogen production with either, I believe, natural gas or RNG on a facility basis. So my understanding of that, to use a very crude example, would be if you had a natural gas supply line to a glass manufacturing facility, and you put, for instance, a pyrolysis unit on that line. So you are producing hydrogen for the industrial customer, but you are also capturing the carbon in a solid form, and there's some aftermarket for that carbon. You take the 45V there. Then you have another industrial customer, separate line, and it's a cement manufacturer or steel manufacturer. You take the 45Q. I believe that is allowed, and that actually turns out to be, financially easier and more beneficial to do than trying to comply with 45V as it's written today for electrolytic hydrogen, which I have found to be sort of a fascinating outcome of the way the rules are drafted. And I'm happy to take any questions on that, but I'm not as sure I can get any deeper technically than what I just did. So anyway, we're going to move on from that rabbit hole right now. And that's it. That's all I have, and I'm happy to take any questions.
I have to come off mute, so there we go. Yeah, so let's see if there's any questions for Michelle. Michelle, thank you for a very thorough presentation, including a couple of rabbit trails, which are interesting. So what I heard you say there in the conclusion is there may be opportunities, actually. It might be easier to do some work on the natural gas side of things as a source than what 45V is pushing toward. Could you elaborate on that
Yep.
just a little bit?
Well, if you're producing hydrogen with natural gas or RNG, there's no additionality requirement. I don't think there's any temporal matching.
Yeah. So you don't have to, the three pillars are not applicable, huh?
Not in my understanding.
All right, any questions for Michelle? We'll give you just 30 seconds or so to type some in. Please use the chat function while we have this wonderful resource here available to you to ask questions. In the meantime, Michelle, I'm going to go ahead and reshare my screen so I can talk just a little bit about next week's or next month's presentation. Actually, I'll do that in just a moment. Any questions for Michelle? Again, hopefully you're typing them in if you have some questions.
This is a quiet crowd. Why are we so quiet? Is it because everybody's hungry?
It is a quiet crowd, right? Unusually so. Okay, let's see. Let's see that. And I'm going to go to there. Okay, there we go. So let me just double check that we don't have any questions in yet. No questions in yet. Hopefully there's one or two being typed in. Thank you again, Michelle, for your time today. We do encourage you to sign up for our March 21st webinar to learn more about GTI Energy's Net Zero Infrastructure Project. For those of you that aren't familiar with GTI Energy, it used to be called many years ago, actually, the Gas Technology Institute, before it became GTI period, and now it's GTI Energy. So they have a foundation in the natural gas and natural gas infrastructure world. And the Net Zero Infrastructure Project, colloquially referred to as NZIP, is one that they've been working on, provides a framework for understanding how to utilize the vast infrastructure across North America, natural gas infrastructure across North America, to get to net zero. So to help us achieve our objectives. So we do encourage you strongly to join us for that one, learn more about what's going on. And by the way, hydrogen is a part of that picture, right? So so we appreciate your time. Okay, I do have a question here, Michelle. Let me get in. From Morrison. Hi, Matt, from Penware. Does the 45V rule consider the carbon intensity of, so I'm thinking of the hydrogen molecule. So I think where Matt's going with that is sort of the carbon intensity, right? So the whole value chain of production of the hydrogen molecule.
Yeah, yes, it does. So it's a life cycle analysis from well to gate. And it utilizes the GREET model. There is a special 45V GREET edition for just hydrogen. So
Great. Well, Michelle, not seeing any other questions and feeling like I've given ample time for that, we will thank you one more time for your time. Remind our attendees that if you would like a copy of the slide deck that Michelle gave us, please email Judy Adair at adairj@nwda.org and ask her for that slide deck, and she will get that to you. If you have friends or colleagues who you think might have an interest in the information that Michelle has presented, you can forward them to our YouTube channel and